guys. Let's start with some winners. These can be rookies or NFL veterans. Jamie, who jumps out to you as a fantasy winner?
I mean, obviously Ashton Jeanty. You look at the landing spot was great. Love the setup for him. This is one of the teams we talked about as, he would be a winner going there. Runway is clear for him to not have to share touches. You know what Pete Carroll's history is with featured running backs. So the setup is perfect. The player hopefully will be perfect. Great for him. You want me to keep going to other winners?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Trevor Lawrence, obviously getting Travis Hunter, looking at the setup there for him. I like the fact that he's going to spend at least the majority of his time on offense. So it's a great situation for him. And then I think just, piggybacking off the trade there, this is great for Jerry Jeudy. It's great for David Njoku. We thought that Hunter was going to go there. With the way Joe Flacco played in 2023 in the system and how he aired the ball out and hoping to do the same thing, with what we saw from Jeudy last year and obviously what he did with Njoku in that season. So I think it's a win for both of those guys. Other winners that stand out. I mean, obviously the quarterbacks that got receivers, I think they all win. Jordan Love getting a game breaker and Matthew Golden, obviously Bryce Young getting another playmaker and Tet McMillan. Baker Mayfield, my God. I mean, he's got as good a receiving core as anybody in the league right now. I mean, this is just, the rich getting richer. It gives them the, assuming he's the guy for the next, 4 or 5 years, which I doubt that they would like to change things based on the way that he's played. Hopefully he stays healthy and continues to produce like this. I mean, Baker goes from throwing to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin to Godwin bridging the gap and still having Jalen McMillan and now Ibuka. Like this is fantasy heaven for the Bucs and this receiving core. It's a little bit of a headache this year, but obviously from a quarterback standpoint, it's fantastic.
Dave, you want to add anything to winners?
I don't think so.
Okay. Yeah, I think there were some players that I was anticipating being losers today. Jamie mentioned the Browns guys, Jeudy and Njoku. I'd say Garrett Wilson. I was also anticipating maybe him having to share targets on a team that's going to be pretty low in pass attempts to begin with the tight end, with Loveland or Warren, but they went with Membu instead. They take an offensive tackle. I thought about something Heath said because there was a comment in our chat. We got a very active chat right now. I appreciate that. It's midnight right now, Eastern. Comment in our chat if I could just find it. Sorry, it said something like the only destination I really liked was Jeanty, I think. Oh yeah, here we go. It's from Rhonda. The only landing spot I love thus far is Jeanty's for fantasy football purposes, of course. I poo-pooed something Heath said a little bit on Wednesday's show. God, it feels like it's been 4 days ago, but it was just yesterday, where he thought Green Bay would be a good spot for a wide receiver. I don't know if he specifically said Matthew Golden, actually. I could look. No, he said Ibuka. I kind of see where he's coming from. I said, well, look, they spread the ball around so much. They haven't had a 100-target guy, I don't think, in 2 years. Nobody even had 80 targets last year. But this is always a good offense. I think LaFleur is a really good coach. And they're, at least he's not going to be, at least Matthew Golden's not going to be wasting away on some crappy offense. And maybe he just has the opportunity to be better than everyone else. And Christian Watson's going to miss some time. So I could see that. So at first I didn't love it, but I'm thinking about it, at least he's got an opportunity. If he is as good as some people think he is, I think he can rise above it and thrive. Maybe as early as late in his rookie season, Matthew Golden going to the Packers. Do you like Golden or McMillan better right now for 2025? McMillan to the Panthers, Golden to the Packers.
I'll take McMillan because I think that there's a much faster path for him to lead that team in targets from game to game. You don't spend a top 10 pick on that guy and say, well, we need to spread it around between him and Adam Thielen and Xavier Legette. He's actually the perfect type of receiver that I would want to have with Bryce Young, because Bryce Young, we know about the size limitations, and he's got a target now who is literally always open because he's so tall, he's physical enough, and he can leap for those 50-50 balls. And I would imagine that he's going to have a shot to get north of 7 targets per game. So I would have McMillan over Golden, but I do see what you see with Golden. They raved about his character at Texas and at Houston. I did a lot of research on him, and he was somebody that coaches talked about, always wanted to get better, always wanted to work with his quarterbacks, really seemed focused on just trying to improve his game. And so I think he'll be receptive to anything that Matt LaFleur and the Packers coaching staff puts in front of him. And that coaching staff, really until the last couple of years, man, they did a decent job cultivating talent. One of the more recent guys they did have success with and turn into a starter was Alan Lazard. And maybe some of that was Aaron Rodgers kind of forcing it. And maybe they were just running out of guys. You remember when Lazard found his opportunities, they couldn't find a number 2 receiver. But Lazard, who went undrafted, ended up being that guy. This is who's replacing Christian Watson. This is someone who could be a do-it-all receiver for them. I think as far as their healthy receivers go, the only guy that they have that is that right now is Dobbs. So there's a track for him to play, and I agree with you, Adam. I think the second half of the year, we could see Golden play well and be a very good fantasy. Very good. A good enough to start as like a number 3 receiver type fantasy option. That's probably what he could be.
So I think it's going to come down to a couple things. Will they throw the ball more? That's a big part of this, because what we saw last year was they didn't. They regressed from what looked like, some potential stars in 2023 when Jaden Reed was, I know doing some things carrying the ball, but they were, much more effective throwing the ball that season. And even Christian Watson was having some good plays. If we get Christian Watson back at some point in the latter half of the season, then it becomes very messy, because he'll get on the field in some capacity, and it's going to be, I think, a little bit of a problem. But I think also, you're looking at it, and this kind of goes to Dave's point, but I'll take the other side of it, about them cultivating talent. Sometimes they've done that, which I think you can make the case, Lazard, maybe Romeo Dobbs. They didn't really do it with Christian Watson, obviously, because, whether it was health or whatever, not getting the best out of him. I think it's going to see, is Dobbs just a guy? Is Dontavian Wicks just a guy?
Yes.
Is Jaden Reed, I don't want to say just a guy, but, if those guys aren't potential big-time playmakers, and Golden is, then he'll command targets and he'll get all the production that we look for. If they're all just kind of good players, and I know Golden's draft capital doesn't say that, but if they're all just good players, and Dave brought this up, I think it was Dave when we were, breaking down the wide receivers prior to the draft about, he didn't really come on until the end of his
last 10 games.
And is that a byproduct of just a player getting it, or is that a byproduct of, just maybe some things working in his favor? It's hard to, see, but clearly he worked himself into a position to get drafted this high. And a lot of people think he was the best receiver in this class. So if all that talent shows, then he's going to command the football. If that talent doesn't show, then we're probably talking about another guy that's maybe hovering around 100 targets and just part of the, another cog in the wheel of this Green Bay receiving corps. So it can go either way. I just think fantasy-wise, he's going to be a little disappointing by comparison to what McMillan could be in his role with the Panthers, to what Hunter could be in his role with the Jaguars, and not this year, but eventually what Abuka's role could be with the Bucs.
Yeah, McMillan. I'm pretty pumped for McMillan, honestly. Deontay Johnson, he scored 19.8 or more PPR fantasy points in 3 of 5 games with Andy Dalton. Adam Thielen in his last 7 games after returning from injury, Adam Thielen was on pace for 97 catches, 1,229 yards, 10 touchdowns on 121 targets in his last 7 games. I think McMillan could be pretty damn good.